Hi, I'm Willie Downs, and this is The Journey. Today, we have a very special guest with us. Pete Docter is the Chief Creative Officer at Pixar Animation Studios. He's directed the films Soul, Inside Out, Up, and Monsters, Inc. He got his start at Pixar over 3 decades ago, where he helped develop the story and characters for Toy Story, for which he was also supervising animator. Pete, it's an honor to have you here on The Journey.
It's good to be here. Thanks.
So, over the course of your career, you've accomplished more than most could ever imagine. Today, many aspiring artists dream of working at Pixar. It's often seen as the pinnacle of success. You, of course, got your start there and have risen through the ranks to where you are now. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I want to kind of take us back to when you were a kid. What were you like as a child, and what did you aspire to be when you grew up?
Yeah, I mean that is like somehow we get hung up on that as kids, right? What am I going to be when I grow up? Like, what am I right now? I guess is a better question. I was even then kind of obsessed with animation. I thought somehow, I guess what it is. Probably I was too much of a socially awkward kid to really connect with people in real life, like through conversation. So instead, I would sit and draw. That was a lot easier, and I found connection through making stuff, making movies, and then showing to people, and they would laugh or not, or comic books and things like that. So I think it was really that need to connect that made me chase after the filmmaking. And at first I was into all the technique. You're into, if it moves, it's great, doesn't matter. And then after a while, you start to be like a little more discerning. Oh, it should actually have something to say. Maybe it could be funny. Maybe it could be emotional in some way. And so that's been my, early journey, was figuring that stuff out.
So, did you ever really see yourself as an artist, and how did that play out in those early years?
Yeah, artist is a weird term. It's almost like feels like a gift word, something that you can't give yourself. Somebody else has to tell you you're an artist. So I never quite allowed myself to say that. I guess I would say I'm an animator, a craftsman, whatever kind of lesser highfalutin, not quite as highfalutin name. But I don't see there's anything wrong with that. I think the line is very blurry, and if you want to get into all of that, like what defines an artist, I think for me, I guess I look at art as something that moves or emotionally touches people. So in that sense, I guess it could be like a basket or a plate, potentially that could be an emotional experience for somebody. And by emotional, by the way, I don't always mean crying. I mean, that's what people kind of connect with, that idea of emotion. But I think it could be laughing, could be fear, could be anything, any of the emotions. But I feel like that is our job as artists, is to take this craft, whether it's music or painting or drama, writing, and affect people emotionally. That's what you go to a movie for.
So, how did you discover the art of animation, and what impact did it have on you?
Well, I think were a couple of things. Disney at the time. So I'm old enough to predate home video, and the only way you could see any of the Disney movies was if you were lucky enough to catch it in the theater when they released it every 7 years. So I remember seeing a few movies that way. And then on Saturday morning, there would be the Warner Brothers cartoons. And I think that was really what got me, is the Bugs Bunny, Roadrunner, all of those, the Chuck Jones shorts, Fritz Freeling, two of my favorite directors even now. So those films, I could see every Saturday. Of course, you didn't have any control over which ones they were. Like, oh no, it's a Speedy Gonzales. Those are not really my favorite. So nothing wrong. I hope there's no Speedy Gonzales fans that are out there now offended by me. But, we all have our favorites.
So, was there anyone in your life at an early age that encouraged you to pursue your dreams?
Let's see. Well, I'm very lucky, first of all, to have parents. The arts are full of people who have these stories of their parents are like, whack, no, stop drawing. You're going to be you're going to be an accountant or you're going to be a doctor or whatever. My parents were both musicians, and so they were very open to this idea. They didn't really understand exactly what I was doing with animation because it's a little bit of a jump from music, but they were very encouraging, allowed me to paint on the wall or redecorate my room in whatever way I wanted. They were happy to facilitate running around looking for strange supplies to build camera devices and all of that. So they were probably my first inspiration and first I don't know what facilitator is that the word? I mean, somebody who aids you and helps you along. But then yeah, I mean I have I'm only here because of all the people that encouraged me and taught me and I think at a young age you're really susceptible to other people's feedback, in fuzzy ways. I mean, it might be as simple as somebody looking at something that you drew and just go, "Huh, that's really good," and that will just power you for weeks, months. You never know, like what are those things that people do? I had a fourth grade teacher who said, because I loved drawing Peanuts cartoons, I would just copy what Charles Schulz did, and she said, "Have you ever thought of making your own?" And that set me on 4 or 5 years worth of making cartoons that way. So yeah, I think there's a lot of inspiration.
So, did you ever have any doubts or fears as a young person that you really struggled with to overcome?
Yeah. um okay, so if you're talking about like doubts or fears about would I make it as an animator, no, because I didn't really worry about that. I just knew my goal, strangely, was not to become something, but to make something right now. So I guess I sort of loosely thought about I would like to work at Disney when I was a kid, but it was mostly like, hey, I want to make this short film. How do I do that? And mostly the joy of doing it propelled me through the fears of is this going to be bad or good? And it was all a new discovery. But it's almost like for me, as I learned more, I had more fears because I realized, oh, wait, this doesn't all, when you're a kid, you're just like, well, how hard can it be? I'll just try, and there it is. But then you start to realize, oh, it doesn't always work out. And so I think I had more fears the more I did it. And I think that was true for me here at Pixar too.
So, you kind of touched on this a little bit. Was there ever someone early on that took that role of a mentor? And if so, tell us a little bit about that relationship.
I was super fortunate to be at a school where they had this thing called the Mentor Connection. And I guess it was probably my mom who had heard about it and kind of lobbied for me to get in. But they hooked up students with people in the business of whatever it was that they were interested in. Like a friend of mine was into artificial intelligence, even way back in the 80s. And so he was matched with, I think it was Honeywell, which was a Minnesota company, or was at the time anyway. I got hooked up with this commercial group that did animated commercials, TV commercials. And so I would drive out there. This is, I think, junior, senior year of high school. And they were, I don't know why they gave me so much free. They're like, here's all the equipment, anything you want, just go ahead and make something. I guess that was easier than sitting down with me initially and, trying to train me or whatever. But there was one guy named Bill Barter, who I still am in contact with, who was an animator there. So I was completely in awe, didn't know how any of this worked. But I would go ask him questions and he would give me advice and talk about different techniques and ideas and so on. So yeah, he was a big early influence. That was, of course, before I went to college.
How would you say that relationship has shaped you as a person?
He was very giving and open and encouraging. And I think that was, whether he knew this or not, that was exactly what I needed. Because, there are other more like, I guess I would think of coaches who are a little more hard ass, who are just like, nope, not good enough. Go back, do it again. Would be kind of ruthless, but truthful. And I don't think that would have worked for me personally. I think it might have disappointed me or crushed me in some way. But it was a great way of encouraging me is to be more positive and expose me to new stuff. And so, that's definitely things that I've tried to carry forward in my mentor relationships, as well as, shaping me as an artist. The things that different artists and films and filmmakers that he would expose me to were outside the box of what I was looking at the time, and really stretched my brain in a good, healthy way.
What life lessons did you learn from him, and how do they continue to guide you to this day?
Well, let's see. I think he is still around. I think he just retired. He was a teacher for after leaving Bajas Jones, which was the commercial house I worked at. He's just a hard worker. He would show up every day, and whether it was as good as he wanted it to be, he just kept at it and kept working. And I think I've tried to do the same. Um, he's also really good. I don't know if he had done this sort of thing before meeting me, but he obviously ended up using it in his teaching career, his ability to encourage and uh, uh, bring students along, which as I get older, I realize, okay, yeah, it's really fun to make stuff. I still totally, that's why I'm in it. But as I get older, you also realize, oh, it's actually also really cool to work with other people and encourage them to get going and turn them on to stuff and challenge them in fun ways, that expose them to things they hadn't thought about, and give them different things to tools to be able to get better at what they're doing.
So, how did that mentor relationship play a role in the direction of your career?
So this was in high school, and he talked. I was really interested in learning more and going to some school, like a college. And so, I would ask him for advice. He talked about how to put a portfolio together and what I should include in there. So all that went into what I did when I applied at Cal Arts, the California Institute of the Arts, and I got in. So I guess it worked. Listening to his advice was good.
So, based on your personal experience, how valuable is having a mentor in the life of a young person?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely crucial. Let me jump around for a minute. I was also lucky enough, as I was first starting out as a director on Monsters Inc., the first thing I did. I met this guy who was 91 years old at the time, and he was working at Disney, not still, but again, because he worked there back when Walt Disney was alive. This guy's name was Joe Grant. He wrote the story for Dumbo. He picked out music for Fantasia. He was there like when that stuff happened. He was a contributor and a major contributor. So that was another really great relationship for me because I had probably delusional ideas of what that period of time was like and how those movies came to be. You always think that they're so magical, especially when you grow up on these things, it feels like, oh, they just came down from heaven and here they are, perfect. And then you talk to Joe and you realize, oh, no, that's not how it worked. It was the same thing we're doing, which is just slugging away at it every day, starting with something kind of mediocre and making it slowly get better, through collaboration and through hard work. So that was another great relationship that I think I benefited immensely from. And I still think I need more older people in my life, even though I'm getting to be old now, because whether it be in your chosen field or just in life, there's a vantage point, an experience level that you're looking at life through that can only be gotten through time and through a lot of hard knocks. Things that you value when you're young, you're like, oh, it's all about getting this thing and achieving this thing and whatever. And then when you get to a certain age, you look back and go, that's actually not the stuff that I really value now. It's not the things I remember that are the most meaningful to me anymore. That's my kids, that's my relationships. So I think having people that are older than you, wiser than you, and have an experience that you haven't is can only help.
So tell us about how you got your start at Pixar and what was going on in your mind when you started the job.
Well, first of all, let me say Pixar at the time when I started here in 1990, it was not known by anybody. If you had heard about it, it was because they made some computers, which were not like home computers. These were multi-million dollar machines that only like the government and medical imaging people had access to. So we literally like within blocks of the studio, we walked around with a video camera and said, "Do you know what Pixar is?" And everyone was like, "No, I have no idea." So it was not a well-known, famous place. It was a small, dinky little computer company, which was well outside the range of what I was thinking. Because I was drawing right at school. I was animating with a pencil, and I figured I would do something like that. And then I heard about this place, and I'd seen some of the short films, like Luxo Jr., which is still to this day one of my favorites, just so well done. It looked to me at the time so real. I was like, wait a minute, is that like a model? What's going on there? How are they doing this? But it was character-based stuff. Like you could tell that one was a parent, and the one was a kid, and just having fun and jumping on the ball and stuff. So that was really striking to me. And I was lucky enough to know one of the teachers at Cal Arts was friends with a guy who was up at Pixar. And so through him and seeing my films in a couple of festivals, they ended up getting in touch with me. It wasn't a place I probably would have applied because it wasn't a place we all kind of knew, like it was just a few people doing these short films. So I was lucky enough to kind of have a hand reached out towards me. I guess my teacher, Joe Ramft, felt like I would be a good match. And so, there's the old adage, it's not what you know, it's who you know, which is not really true. You do have to have skills, but it's amazing. And it's not like that it always makes it sound like you have to know famous people or whatever. It's not true. I think anybody is going to have these connections and relationships that you never know how that will impact you.
So did you ever question if you were cut out for the job? And if so, tell us how you overcame those doubts.
I think as an animator, I felt pretty confident. I felt fairly safe because, well, there's a couple exceptions. Okay, so I had not really worked on computers before. I had done hand-drawn animation. And then John Lasseter, who is in charge creatively, he said, "Look, I'm too busy to work to teach you how to use this software. So sit here with Andrew Stanton, who had just started like 2 months before me, and he'll teach you how to do it." Andrew didn't know what he was doing either. He was still like swearing at the computer and not having a good time. So there were a couple of weeks there, and as I started going on the thing, I was thinking, what? I made a horrible mistake. This does not make any sense to me. I don't get it. And then slowly, I think just through perseverance, your brain, you start to figure it out. I had a similar experience working on Monsters, Inc., which was, now let's see, this is 5 years later, a little more, because right after Toy Story, I started developing this project. I think at the time I thought, oh, well, this will probably be something else that John directs, but I'm trying to come up with something so that we have more than one idea in the pipeline. So I started working on this thing, which was about monsters who scare kids, and it was going along. And after a while, I started to get a crew, and we were well into the project, but I kind of knew it was not working. The movie just was not, it wasn't funny, it wasn't entertaining, it wasn't emotional. And Steve Jobs, who ran the studio at one point, well, he didn't run it, he owned it. But I'm trying to make this a shorter story. He basically, the long and short of it is, he sat with me and said, "I don't know if this is going to work out for you. The directing thing just doesn't seem to be clicking." And especially from anybody to hear that is demoralizing, much less someone like Steve Jobs. So I did question, boy, am I going to be able to cut this? It was clearly not working. And I think it was largely just through fear and perseverance of just, I can't give up now. I remember thinking, I'm going to keep at this until they tell me to go home. I'm going to keep trying because what else can I do? All I can do is my best, and I'm trying to learn as fast as I can. It was a scary time, and I think the other thing I learned from that is it's something that happens on every film. So the idea that if you, as a whatever your profession is, as an animator, think, hey, I'm just going to show up and I'm going to be perfect for the job and I'm going to excel at every moment, yeah, you're gonna have to change your expectations. I think part of the job, part of life is coming into these situations where it looks like everything is going to fail. And then what do you do? And really all you can do is keep at it.
So, what is one of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome and to get to where you are today?
Um, well, there's the Steve Jobs thing I just mentioned. Um, I mean, I've been very fortunate in that I got here to Pixar at a time when it was small, and so I could kind of grow with it. In fact, a lot of people, when they ask me, "How do I get a job at Pixar?" I think, or I tell them, don't get a job at Pixar. Work at a small place where you can have a bigger influence on things, because that was my experience at the time. There were only 10 of us working in the animation group when I started. And so all of us had to do story work and design work. And like, it was you had to be a generalist. And now we've got 1,500 people. You are very much a specialist. You might do not only just the clothing simulation, but specific kinds of clothing simulation. If you're an animator, you develop kind of specialties. You're really good with cute characters or big weighty characters or whatever. So, I think, geez, what question was I answering? I got way off the track here.
Just what was your biggest challenge that you've had to overcome?
Yeah. Yeah. So like I say, I can't think of any. I've just been very fortunate, other than the sort of everyday doubts that I think all of us face. And again, that has happened on every film. Even, Soul, which was the last one I did. You'd think by now I'd kind of have some confidence and know what I'm doing, but there were definite days where I just thought, this is a disaster. If I should just quit and save them the time of bother of firing me.
So, what has been your biggest failure, and what did you learn from that experience?
Hmm. Well, one thing that maybe not apparent to people when they look at a Pixar film is that they pretty much all stink at one point or another. And so if you went back in time and looked at an earlier version of Monsters Inc. or Up, you'd be like, this is going to be a disaster. It's going to sink the studio. So I think and you learn so much from that because, one thing that Ed Catmull and John Lasseter tried to instill in the studio from the get-go is it's not going to be perfect the first time. We have to we have to give ourselves the grace to make a lot of mistakes, to try stuff, to be wild and experimental, because once in a while, one of those weird things that just shouldn't make sense actually works. And the process of kind of goes back again to like, how do you define success? Because if you're thinking, I just want to make a film that wins an Oscar and makes, $1 billion, that's a long term goal. And I don't know if it really matters in the end. I think, as an artist, as an individual, you're just trying to do something that is a reflection of you so that you can give to the audience, so you can make them feel something. I feel like that's a much better goal. And in the process of doing that, it means that I'm going to allow myself to make mistakes. I'm going to try different things and then fall flat on my face when nobody laughs, nobody cries, nobody likes it. But then you have to kind of go back to the source of what started this whole idea? Why was I excited about it to begin with? and try to dig that up. I think a couple artists here call that the North Star. What is it that we're following from the beginning? Because so many things change about our stories as we go. Like the main character, well, on Inside Out, we had joy and fear paired together for about 2.5 years as we were working on it, writing. And it was only as we were starting to go into production that we realized, oh no, it should be joy and sadness. And that's a minor change compared to a lot of stuff that just things shift and change all over the place. So to have clear I probably would say in your heart more than your head, what it is you're chasing. What's the North Star for you? Why are you excited about this thing? Is it the emotional epiphany that the character has? Is it the personal experience? What is it that you're trying to get across to the audience so that as things change, you can come back and kind of have something to hold on to?
Well, with a few minutes left, so through a series of events, you found yourself with the opportunity of a lifetime that most people would consider, the opportunity, right? To be chief creative officer of Pixar. Tell us about that moment and what was going on in your mind and what fears, doubts, or reservations you had about taking that position.
Yeah, if you've ever seen or even photos of the Disney building, it's this big kind of a orange building with columns and dwarves on the roof, and that's where Bob Iger's office was. And so I remember being called in and walking through these massive columned hallways, and then he's like, "Hey, we want you to take this job." And I was thinking, I don't want to take this job. I don't want to do this. I want to just make movies. But I also was, of course, flattered that he thought I could do it, and felt so much passion for this place and the people here that I said yes, and then immediately felt like, what do I know about this? I don't know anything about running a company or leading people creatively. But then again, I didn't know very much about directing a feature film or even animating at one point. So you just you just go one step at a time, ask as much advice as you can. And I think curiosity is a huge thing. That's probably in large part what got me the job. Was just even as an animator, as a director, I would ask people questions about how does it work with the marketing, and how distribution, how does that work with when theaters, I ask a lot of questions. I think really broadens your mind, because the answers sometimes are totally shocking and surprising.
Lastly, what is the most important lesson that you've learned over the course of your career?
I'm gonna have to think about this because it has to be a good lesson. Oh boy. Well, I think the most important lesson is that things don't show up fully formed. They continue like you start with something and it's kind of a blob. And then if you imagine like a lump of clay as the way things start, and then as you like push things around and sculpt and remove parts and add other parts, it starts to form something. And I think for a lot of people, they have this idea that their career, their life, or even a creative project is somehow supposed to like just appear fully formed. It's actually not. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to go through a lot of cycles. And the only way I've found to make really that work is creative collaborations, to rely on other people that you trust that will tell you the truth and not just tell you something that you want to hear. Because, of course, we all want to hear, it's great, you're wonderful, wow, you're so creative, right? That's what you want to hear. But what you need to hear is, I was totally confused. I don't understand. Your main character did this. I didn't understand that. So that then allows you to go back, make changes to it, and improve things and make it better.
Very good. Pete, it was my absolute honor to have you here as a guest on the journey. And thank you for joining me, and look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks. Nice to talk to you.
You too. Have a good one, Pete.
All right. See you, Willie.